较多安尼嘛，有咧讲加州也是NATWA的姊妹，拢对伊足熟悉啦吼。伊是一个NATWA II，足早就参加NATWA II，啊嘛来过NATWA演讲真侪届安尼吼。所以咱即摆若看到伊的迄个 poster， 咱就知影讲伊的迄个伊有一个真好 outstanding、very outstanding 的迄个 credential。安尼，我想大家拢读啦吼。啊嘛，我感觉我足 impress 伊的志愿啦，伊就是讲伊要解除，伊要 get rid of those stigma of mental health。咱对 mental health 的惊吓啊，甲 stigma， 伊要解除安尼，我感觉这真赞的迄种的志愿啦。啊，毋过我即摆就讲一寡讲，我对伊诶较 personal 的熟悉。Michi 的妈妈住伫台湾 ，Am I right, Michi？啊，Michi 为着要照顾伊妈妈，啊，伊伫台湾住1年外，咧 COVID 时间，伊就定定会当转去台湾。啊，迄个伊伫台湾的时间，像伊头拄仔讲的，讲伊嘛有去迄个台湾大学 Taiwanese University National University 去教册，啊，伊嘛做真侪迄个 lecture。At the same time， 伊嘛走去台湾学校，都走去读一寡中文啦，啊，搁台语啦吼，啊，搁互伊家己搁较了解讲。无共款的文化，无共款的语言，啊，甲无共款的 generation 中间的差别吼，会当引起一些沟通上的即个可能的一寡误解，也是讲可能一寡迄个 problem 安尼啦吼。啊，伊即款的了解，就会当搁较帮助讲，伊来帮助咱即个世代，咱即个 generation， 甲咱的囡仔，甲咱的。迄个孙仔，啊，甲咱外口的社会沟通啦吼。不过，我拄仔咧讲问题，即问题无一定是歹代志啦吼。有嘛就当嘛真好耍，就是讲2年前吼，我伫台北的时候，我有去看Michi主持的一个迄个，落摆我知影是 improv 的 workshop， 就是讲啊跟迄个演员吼即时的即款的迄个演出，啊，互Michi就请遮演员啊，大概甲因讲一个 situation 安尼，真简单吼。啊，毋过大家安尼看的时阵，你就会感会心的微笑安尼笑出来安尼吼。啊，因为迄内底阿嬷定咧问讲，啊，恁是咧讲啥物啦？安尼啦吼。啊，所以咱今日就请Michi用即个主题来用伊的专长吼，啊来甲咱讲啊。会当安怎帮助咱的交通，甲咱的后一代，甲咱的无共款的文化的人沟通搁较好安尼。啊无 ，Mike is yours, Michi.
Okay, 谢谢金如。I want to say thank you to NATWA for having me today. And 很对不起，我们刚才在讲说我的台语。其实是我的母语。阮伫美国时阵，阮爸母拢计算因袂晓英文，所以阮必须要甲面讲台语，所以可能听出来我的声音，听袂出来讲我是伫美国大汉的。That I do have to use English because I really want to make sure you understand some of the concepts that I have to share today. And unfortunately, my Mandarin level and my Taiwanese doesn't give me the vocabulary I need to try and teach you some of the things that I think will help with some of the consultation that we had earlier to prepare for today. So thank you very much for having me. I also want to say the folks that are here today, you're very brave. You know, it's not a fun workshop where we're just playing games, but we're thinking about something that's potentially uncomfortable. I was told that there's some cross-culture and a cross-generation opportunities for us to miscommunicate with people that we care about very much. Usually our family members, or maybe across, I don't know, coworkers, but it's harder to have the same kind of feelings. Usually we have bad feelings when we can't communicate properly with our own family members. So in trying to prepare for today's talk, I took a step back, looked at psychology, but asked second-generation Taiwanese Americans, when do you have problems talking to your mothers? Okay, so I asked second-generation Taiwanese Americans, 我甲第二代阮的朋友，我甲因问讲，那我其实就做像阮家己的母亲的年纪，我甲因问讲。When you feel like you don't want to talk to your own mother, what happens to make that happen? But I don't want to make it a scary talk, like don't do this, don't do that, don't, because who wants to hear a talk about don't do things? So I try to change it into positive communication skills, things that second generation really hope for so that they can be closer to their mothers. 可是当然，今天有可能不止 like mothers here. I don't. So far, I'm seeing a lot of female names. Is someone trying to get my attention? Someone's microphone is on. Okay. So that's the approach that I took in trying to come up with the slides for this talk. So I really liked that some of our planning meeting people came up with the title, What Are You Talking About? 你讲虾米? Let me see if I can advance to the next slide. So we already know that my background is I'm a psychologist and I'm a professor. I really love NATWA. NATWA II, 我要感谢郭子安 for really bringing me in and introducing me to the beautiful world of NATWA. Okay. Okay. So before I say anything, I wanna just draw your attention. 你们现在应该看得到我的 PPT. The most important thing that I want to talk about is Confucian values and Western values. Okay, now I have to try and get out of this so I can see you all. Hopefully you saw on the slides just now at the very top Confucian values. But here I have to first do a disclaimer. 有可能很多在这里面根本跟 Confucian 都没有关系的. Maybe some of you are more Americanized than like my own mother, or maybe even more Americanized than me. Actually, a lot of my second generation friends think I'm very Taiwanese. 能够回去台湾住1年 to get my citizenship, 他们觉得我非常是很奇怪的人. So in some ways, I'm trying to learn how to be more Taiwanese, but truly the way I was raised in the classrooms, 要一直举手, that kind of behavior is drilled in me as being very American. You're not a good student unless you keep raising your hand. 台湾的话，你一直插进去，人家会以为 like you're very disrespectful kind of a student, right? The way that you were all raised is like 很听话，写下来，老师说什么，老师说什么就是那样子. There's no challenging it. That's a very good student. So I want to first, before I talk about communication, talk about 文化. Because the values underneath the way that we communicate to others, if it's different than the other person, 很多机会可以误会. And I'm speaking from personal experience right now. 2 weeks ago, I had an opportunity to assist some friends from Taiwan. And in their organization, the project leader is from Taiwan. They wanted me as a Taiwanese American to help bridge the gap with American side people. But actually, it was a very stressful project because I thought the person that I was working with 很多经验跟美国人相处. And I think she thought 像你们一样，一听我的台语时阵，伊就感觉讲，哦，这个人是很台, okay? But then we realized whenever we had a project management, like a problem-solving opportunity, I think she used a very Taiwanese approach, which is Confucian, right? Confucian 会说 hierarchy 很重要, right? Like there's going to be one head of the table, even the way that we sit at tables for dinner. 这个位置是很珍贵的，其他的坐最外面 like 小朋友坐最外面，我们还可以再做一个小朋友 but like 那个长辈只有一个人而已 right? So the way that we approach hierarchy in the more traditional Taiwanese sense is very different than the US. Egalitarian. 我不管你是90岁还是9岁的，你说对就是对 right? So it's a very different approach here where everyone's equal. We don't have a seating chart. Whoever gets there first gets to sit at the good spot. In fact, it gets a little bit awkward. I don't know if you're like that with your grandkids. Some of them might be very Taiwanese and like, oh, grandma, you sit first. But some might be like, that's my seat. I got there first because at school, that's what we do, right? So already we have one difference is the hierarchy. Another difference is collectivism. We care a lot about the group. In fact, very, very traditional style architecture for family housing. 我去过很多地方, I can see like, it doesn't matter if it's the Fujian style or the Hakka style, it's the U-shaped, where the center of the family, the parents live in the front, maybe like oldest son lives on one side and second son, this is like very, very old traditional, but 现在还有那个 structure. We still see those in existence. So even if as a family unit, we don't live with each other in that kind of way, the mentality is still the same, where the house is not just whoever pays for it. That's not considered the way to be in more traditional Taiwanese households is very collectivistic. So collectivism, 跟 American 的文化 of individualism, this is a very different way of communicating now. If I'm individualistic, I'm going to teach you what I know. I'm going to show you 表演出来 my knowledge. In fact, in the US education system, you will fail if you try and look too harmonious, right? Like 我们在台湾, 我们会, like, I think all of you, if you attended grade school, your grades were posted for all of your classmates to see. In the US, that's illegal. Your own grades are your private matter. In Taiwan, you're always in relation to someone else. Someone's always higher or lower than you. So everyone's collectivistic. If I have a very collectivistic viewpoint, I'm going to try very hard to not make anyone feel bad. Okay, someone's trying to get attention. I don't know who the host is, but if maybe someone can make sure all the people are muted, that would be helpful. Hello, Lame Gongwei. So maybe we can all make sure our microphones are muted. Okay. Thank you. I could check the participants, but I think it's easier for the host to do that. Okay, so if I'm using communication as a tool to show how much I as an individual know, or try and keep the peace, like in Asian cultures, the harmony is 很爱面子, right? We want to help people save face. We don't want anyone to feel bad. Actually, this was very confusing for me. 我去台湾的时候, you know, like here, if we say the grocery store closes at 8, you can actually walk in at 7:55 or even 7:59 and still get into the store because they're not closed yet. But Taiwan, I remember there was one time it's like 还没到那个8点 or something. It was like 7点 something, 7点半而已. I remember I went into the store, but it was locked. So I asked them, is your store open? And it was a yes or no question. It's supposed to be open until 8. But instead they kept saying 不好意思. And I was like, 为什么说不好意思？有开还是没有开而已啊? Right? To me, it's a business transaction. Because the one at the store, 很乖的小朋友 like, oh, 不好意思, 不好意思. I was like, I still didn't get a correct answer, but I know now they were just trying to help me save face. They didn't want to make me feel bad. 很直接跟我讲说我们关了. Maybe they feel like that makes me feel bad. But in the US, they feel like that's very strange. If you know the answer, why don't you just say it? Why do I have to guess what you're thinking? It's a very strange, different orientation, because in maybe the Taiwanese way, we think this is the best because no one feels bad. I didn't say no to you directly. 我说不好意思，你应该就聪明的话可以猜出来，我们的意思就是不能进来了。Okay? But you can see how 这个很小的事，他们其实想要帮我not 丢脸， but 我其实真的想要知道的目的，他们还没有回。要是我真的不是很猜的话，我就没办法猜出来。Well, that was a very strange story. They don't even know how to answer a question. This can happen in our families too, where 我们想说, like, I'm going to help someone save face, so I'm not going to tell them directly, no, we can't go camping this summer. But maybe in my mind, I already know I don't want to go camping. So anytime it comes up, I'm just going to take it somewhere else. If that happens over time, someone's going to think it's very confusing to communicate with the other person. 他们会觉得很累. Like, I can't keep guessing if it's a yes or a no. Can you just tell me? Okay. So actually I say something and I'm like, ooh, I already feel very strange telling you that this is a difference. I know you already know this, 因为你可能已经感觉出来说, okay, those are only some of the values. Another value that Confucian talks about a lot is obedience. Obedience and filial piety, right? 要孝顺. And then 孝顺还包说囡仔人有耳无嘴。你真的很respect 我的话，你不会硬吹硬挤 ，OK？你就会听 and you won't even ask why. You'll just do it because you love me and you trust me. This is actually very opposite of what we're taught in the US school system. In the US school system, you shouldn't just accept everything the teacher says. In fact, they have classes to teach you how to debate. 我不晓得你们有没有小朋友 in your own households, they signed up for the debate club. Debate club 跟我们说囡仔人有耳无嘴 is complete opposite, right? 一个是你们说什么 even if I think it's weird or wrong, like 不能喝冰的 okay, 只能喝热水而已. Even if it's something that you know to be true, just saying it and expecting the other person to accept it, that means they're not going to be very successful in the American culture. Unless 他们知道说跟妈妈相处的时候要用这种方法. And then at work in corporate America, you know what we're facing? There's something called the glass ceiling for women. We already know that. It's well researched. As an Asian American, we have another thing called the bamboo ceiling. The bamboo ceiling is for people that only say yes and they never ask any questions and they always obey. 我们用台湾的方法 of just obeying without any kind of questioning, 在美国的 corporation 会很吃亏. We will never get to advance to like CEO level because then they assume that you never wrestle with the concepts and think of something new. It's a very different orientation, right? And then the last thing I'll say about Western values, individualism. I already talked about curiosity and debate, even having clubs about debating, and people who win the debate get a medal and everything. There's something else about American or Western ways of communication. This is a very different orientation. So 你们真的要用这种方法 actually feel very, I admire all of you for having the courage to think differently about our values, how to adjust in order to have better relationships. Another one that Americans do is they're really big about self-expression. 我今天想要哭，我就在你面前哭。And it's so different from Taiwanese. It's like, 不管我今天心情好不好，我还是笑笑的给人家看。这个跟那个爱面子有一点关系。当然，我们真的有一些人 like will actually show that 有一点困难。But most of the time, if Americans value self-expression, that's why you see like kids just screaming at the top of their heads at the mall. That's why like child psychologists will spend a lot of time, well, how do you feel? Say how you feel. It's a very different idea than in Asian, if we're trying to be harmonious and we don't want anyone to be upset, 我们表现的不只说 like 我们会控制 the content of what we say, we will also control not just our facial expressions to look like we're always pleasantly happy, even if we're very upset. But there's also, like in my household, if I cried, 我妈会说你都哭，我都给你打。So like there's like in Taiwan, I feel like there's会 almost like 闷起来, but for them it's maybe not a big deal because they just learned how to put a mask over things. It's very strange, you know, as a psychologist, I see a lot of people's pain. I see a lot of hunli, the problems, and the wife will come in and say, my husband's been cheating on me, but she has a pleasant smile on her face. I'm like, how do you really feel about that? Do you really feel nothing? Or is it because your culture says you're supposed to accept everything? Okay, so if the American value of self-expression is really big, there's another thing in psychology that happens. I learned somewhere along the way, I've been practicing psychology for a long time. I went into grad school in 94. So for 22 years, I've been studying this after college. One thing I learned is it doesn't matter if I'm a good psychologist or not. People only care if they think you care about them. So I could actually be a really bad psychologist, give you the wrong theories, but if my patient feels like I care about them as a person, well, how do they feel like I care about them as a person? Most of the time, all I'm doing is listening. Most of the time, I'm not doing anything different, except I'm listening to things that maybe their friends and family are tired of hearing them say. Maybe someone always tells their family like, oh, I wish I had a boyfriend, or I wish I got better grades, something, always complaining, right? Maybe the family is like, I'm just going to tell you what to do. I don't take that approach if I'm going to tell you what to do. Instead, I say, okay, tell me what you're thinking. What are your problems? Most of the times, I don't even do anything. I just repeat back to them. So you don't like your job and you wish that you had a boyfriend? And as soon as I say whatever they said to me, they're like, you're a great psychologist. You're a great listener. So that is one of my tips for you today. And we'll practice this later. If you can make the other person feel like you heard them, and that's different than agreeing with them. If you can make them feel like you just heard what they said without even knowing whether you agree with them or not, they'll like you more and they'll want to listen to you more. Okay, so there's a trick in psychology that we use, and it's called active listening. I teach a whole semester on active listening. So 今天没有那个时间 to teach you all the different components. But I am going to have you play a game later from improv. 其实 when I was in Taiwan, 我为什么要教即兴表演？ Well, one, 我在美国，我有执照. I have a license to be a psychologist. When I went to Taiwan, I didn't have a way of helping people to talk about their problems, to express themselves, to learn how to get some of this out. So I started an improv troupe with a group of friends, 是双语的, and I'm so glad Jingru got a chance to go, and Zan 也有机会去看看. One of the things that kept people coming back was they would say, I feel very free in here to act out some of my everyday issues, but they also get to practice how to talk to people. And in fact, it was so successful that I did a separate group, like a theater group for children right before I left Taiwan after my sabbatical. So when I did the children's theater workshop, it was for the same reasons. I wanted to teach them. I had 4 plays, and all the students got to be in a play, or they got to make their own costumes, or they got to make their own sets. So they learned to use creativity to express themselves. They learned how to stand in front of an audience and speak, public speaking. They learned how to communicate with one another in a scene. They actually learned life skills. So later on, if we have time, I'm going to do an improv game with you all, a very simple one, so you can kind of think about using different muscles to listen to people. Okay, before I go on, are there any questions? Okay, and then if you also have any things that you would like to share, you can enter your thoughts into the chat, just like I did there. Okay, so everyone can enter it in the chat. I think there's a way for people to send me a private message if there's something more sensitive you don't want everyone to see. But otherwise, please start using the group chat because I'm going to keep on talking. Okay. The next bit that I wanted to share are 3 major communication tips that I think would help with the cross-cultural between Taiwanese versus American style of communication, and also intergenerational. Okay, so the first one is actually very closely related to the second. Oh, I have to get out of that. Okay. The first one is to invite curiosity. So if in the school system, we think that children are paying attention when they keep interrupting the teacher or when they ask a question out loud, you know, in Jewish schools, they have something called Jewish schools that is very similar to Chinese schools on Saturdays. My Jewish friends, when I sometimes would have conversations with them, 我会觉得他们很 rude，他们都没有礼貌。我犹太朋友常常会插进去，我们在讲话的时候，他们会说 "Oh, that happened to me too." And it's like, we're not talking about you right now. We're talking about this. Actually, one time, my Jewish colleague sent me an article in a journal. She said, "Oh, look," it said something like, "When I interrupt, it means that I care about what you're saying." Someone from the Jewish culture realized that their cultural value is about curiosity, and when you are asking questions, it means you're listening. And it means you're showing the speaker, I'm a good student and I'm trying to think of this and I want you to help me think of it and formulate the idea. So this idea of inviting curiosity is not like all Westerners, but there is an American value of raising your hand and showing what you know. Okay, so that's number one. The other one is valuing other people's perspectives. Now, this one is very hard. 我是属牛, and unfortunately, that means sometimes when I think I'm right, I think I'm right. I have this problem. My 也是属牛, so we have two at the same time. It can be a big mess when we both feel like, why can't you just listen to me and just follow what I say? I actually do this with my nephews too, like, because I said so. And that's actually okay if they were very Taiwanese. My nephews, I don't think they've ever been to Taiwan before. Yeah. 这是我哥哥的小朋友. So using the because I said so or because I'm older than you, it just doesn't work with my brother's kids. In fact, if I do that, they won't talk to me anymore. So now I have to think of like, even if they're shorter than me, I have to like, you know, like sit down and like talk to them at eye level, like, what are you thinking today? Oh, really? Like I'm really interested in them and I think it's all true. But that actually is the best approach for working with very Westernized children, is being very curious about them as a person. One of the biggest compliments I got from my godson, he's not Taiwanese, but his dad is Korean and then his mom is Filipino. So Asian, some of the same values and stuff. One of the biggest compliments he said to me was, you talk to me like I'm a person. This is when he was a very little boy. He said, you talk to me like my grandmother talks to me. Like you pay attention to what I say. And I guess his parents are so in a hurry all the time, like, just put this on, just do that. They never stop to listen to him. It's a little bit different because 干妈跟干儿子, like I can have all the patience in the world, 我还是会推回去他的父母, right? But during that time together, I treat his opinions like no different than another person, and he's not used to that. So Americans have another value where they just want to be validated. I started off talking about, as a psychologist, people think if you repeat back to them what they just said, that you're an excellent listener. Actually, the reason why that works, this can work with you too. If you don't get along with your daughter-in-law, okay, let's pretend she does something that really makes you mad. She does something to your grandchildren where you're like, who would do such a thing? What kind of mother does that? But sometimes approaching them where you validate them, like you made sure not to bring their jacket today because you didn't want them to carry something heavy today. Is that true? So trying to figure out the reasoning why and repeating it back to them makes people a little bit less defensive. If you say, why would you not bring a jacket out when it's already nighttime? The person probably is like, I don't want to talk to you. This is just going to be a criticism on everything I'm doing wrong. But if I feel like you're trying to approach me like, oh, you just didn't want them to carry something heavy for a few hours, that's so kind of you. In the future, when it's this cold, we might want to check the weather and see if we should just throw it in the trunk too. Like it can accomplish the same things, but that one, the person's more willing to listen to you. The other, the person's like, you're not, I don't need to listen to any of this. So something happens to people when they feel validated. And this is actually a thing throughout the lifespan. It doesn't matter whether you're a baby or you're an older person. Most people across cultures want to feel validated. Validated is a complicated English word for I feel like my feelings matter. How do I feel like my feelings matter? Well, number one, someone can say to me, let's pretend with the anti-Asian stuff, right? Someone says something to me about go back to wherever you came from. If I'm by myself, I might feel a little bit scared, or I might feel like, oh, what did I do wrong? But if I have someone next to me saying, hey, you don't get to say that to them, that person is okay and they belong in this country. Oh, suddenly I feel validated, like, I'm an okay person. So validation is a way of someone knowing like there's nothing wrong with me. That's hard to do when you disagree with someone and you want to say there's something wrong with your thinking. But there's a way to offer corrective feedback while still validating the other person's perspective. So how do we do this? We do this with babies, actually. So you don't even need language. With people, you can say, you're a good person, there's nothing wrong with you. With babies, when they don't even have words, how do we do this? Well, one of my favorite games with my nephews was something like this, like, I smile, they smile. Okay. They smile, I smile. Okay. They cry, I cry. They smile, I smile. When a baby smiles, one of the most fun things to do is to smile back. Then the baby, oh my gosh, that's the funnest game in the whole world. The more you smile, the more they smile. It's a very fun game, right? Adults have the same game. We just don't call it that. When someone says hi to me, then I feel like I can say hi back. Oh, you saw me as a person, then I see you as a person. The same kind of thing can happen when we're talking with people too. When we use language, it's a little bit different. Instead of saying, I smile, you smile, someone says something. Maybe I very much disagree with it. But in order to make them feel validated, I first have to let them know I heard them. So they could say something opposite of what I would want, like, Auntie Michi, I'm not going to college anymore. That would really, a young person's life is their life, but I have a lot of feelings about that. So instead of saying, well, I don't think that's a good idea, young person, I think you need to, I'll pay for your school or whatever. Instead of doing that, come from a place of curiosity. Like, you're telling me that you don't like school and that you want to quit. Is that right? So all I've done is repeat back what I think I heard the person say and ask them, is that right? I'm not saying that's a good choice in life, or I'm not saying I disagree with you in life. I'm just asking, you're telling me you're tired of school, you don't want this path anymore. Am I getting that correctly? As soon as I say that, it makes it easier for the other person to say yes, and then give me more reasons. If I say, well, I don't know why you would do that. College is the most important thing in life. The only people that don't go to college are people who don't care about their future. As soon as I say that, the other person's going to say, okay, thanks for your opinion. So it's not to say you're not allowed to have an opinion, but it's more important to first let the other person know, I think I heard you say this. Am I correct? When you can do that, the other person can relax and say, yeah, you understand me. And now I can share more with you. Okay, so those are my 3 that I thought were most, or the 2 first. Invite curiosity, and then valuing other people's perspectives by letting them know you heard them. You don't have to agree with them. Okay, the 3rd one is from a TED Talk. One of my mentors shared this with me earlier this year, and I was like, I don't know if I agree with this or not, but I'm going to share it with you because it's a very American Western style of communicating. There's a Dr. Brene Brown. She's a famous psychologist that's known for other TED Talks, but her most recent TED Talk, she says, being clear is being kind. Being clear is being kind means you have to be as direct as possible. If I already know that we're not going to be able to afford a Christmas vacation, instead of saying 再看吧 or 逛一面吧, like all of these are very inconclusive and it's not a no. If I'm a very Americanized person, I'm going to say it's not a no. So I'm going to keep on asking. But Brene Brown says, if you already know, don't be indirect about it. It confuses some people. And actually, I try and watch some of the old movies, like I try to watch Ling Jingju, but that's a lot of time. Even if when I watch like Chinese movies, the way that they communicate, like, oh, maybe things like Raise the Red Lantern with Gong Li, like decades ago. 哦，她们女生都好厉害，都不用讲话，她们都知道说，今天晚上皇后会到哪一边去，用眼睛看这样子就好了。That's a very indirect way of communicating. 平常的人没那么厉害 unless you grew up in that culture where like, 我这样子看人家，他们就大概都知道我的意思了。Okay? Here in the States, people tend to be so direct that it looks rude or it looks very unclassy by Taiwanese standards. You know, one time my sister, she married someone who is an electrical engineer in Hsinchu. This is as Taiwanese as it gets. And her in-laws, like, I think they're very nice people. They cook really elaborate meals every Sunday and invite the grandkids to come back and stuff. But for some reason, you know, my sister and them, my sister even had more of a problem. 她的中文比我的厉害，可是她跟我一样在美国出生长大。So her in-laws 听她讲话的时候，他们会以为说她应该是很听话的daughter-in-law, right? So one time my sister had infant formula that she needed my nephew to drink. So she had fancy, like a whole bottle system from Germany. It was a new kind where like the tip of the nipple, when you suck on it, not a lot of air. So 不会一直what do you call it? Need to burp the same way. So for my first nephew, she bought this whole German bottle system and gave him the bottle. And the reason why the tip is so special, it's angled a certain way and there's a certain diameter. So 不会太大，你的小朋友不会呛到。But her in-laws, when she would go bring her son over, they'd say, 那么瘦，是不是吃不够? But actually, all the kids in my family, including me when I was little, like 很瘦很瘦. So my family didn't think anything wrong, but 姐夫的他们家的人会觉得 Oh my God, 你们是不是有喂小孩子没有？妈妈没有在看的时候，我们帮他一下。So when my sister wasn't looking, they took the nipple and they cut it. There you go. Now they're going to get all the milk, right? So of course my nephew was choking and stuff. Everyone thought they were helping. And you know, according to my brother-in-law's family, they didn't make her lose face. They didn't tell her, we think you're starving our grandson. We're going to help you. We're just going to do whatever we think it takes. According to my sister, these are the rudest people in the world. They destroyed a very expensive German bottle system. And they also messed with her baby. You know, she's trying to make sure that he gets fed a certain way so she can log it for the pediatrician. 两个是完全不同的方法. They automatically assumed the worst of the other person. So her in-laws did a very Asian way of like, we're not going to make her lose face so we won't make her look bad. So no one ever talks about it. So there's never a problem. My sister was like, if you want me to bring my children over to you on Sundays, you better not mess with my bottles anymore. So instead of doing the 好媳妇 of like, oh, 什么都不讲出来, and then we just figure it out, instead she went around and said, who did this to my baby's bottle? And it became a very big mess. Instead of looking like an assertive American, she looked like a crazy Taiwanese daughter-in-law that didn't know how to speak to her elders, right? So the same thing can kind of happen with Brene Brown saying, you got to be direct. You got to tell people who did this to my baby bottle. I don't like it. This is the opposite of what's considered polite in Taiwan. So how are you going to deal with this? I don't know. But I want you to know, like, this is what's popular on TED Talk right now. You go and be as direct as possible to your boss, to your parents, to your children. This will help you in life. Oh my gosh, well, what are we going to do if we come from a culture where maybe you all are very Americanized, but maybe in the back of your heads, you remember what your parents taught you? Okay, so here I want to pause and see if anyone has any questions before we move on.
I have no question, but I have a comment. I love what you say about validation.
People. Thank you, one other person. But basically how this game would have worked if we were in an improv workshop together, and I have done some through Zoom, many people, we would have all done one story together. So I would have started the story with one word. Jean Rue would have added to the story with one more word. Not What Cares is the third person on my screen, would have added one more word. So it's a very awkward game. It's a very awkward game. It's supposed to be awkward. Okay, so the way that it works is I say something like once, someone says upon, next person says a, next person time, and Ling says there, NATWA office says was, Hui Na Hilda says a, Yiling P 会说 boy, and so on and so forth. Pretty soon, after 20 people, we only got one sentence. Once upon a time, there was a boy who lived in a castle and liked a girl. Okay, the next sentence would be something like, the princess was not interested because she was already wedded or going to be wed to someone else. Next sentence would be something like, a witch said to the prince, if you don't get her to marry you, you'll turn into a frog. And then next sentence we all create would be, the princess was tricked into kissing the frog and now we'll marry this prince. Okay, the end. Whoa, that was so hard. It's a lot harder than it sounds, and we couldn't do it because not everyone's squares are on. The reason why that is one of the most important exercises, it's called one word at a time story. It's a very basic improv game. And we do it in my Swangyu troupe. We do it in Zhongwen, and we also do it in Yingwen. When we do it, it takes too much time. So I won't have us do it. I want us to do the other exercise. When we do it, people realize it's really hard. Before Li Yiming says her word, maybe I'm Kemi Tai. Maybe as Kemi, I already have in my head how the story wants to work, but the other person used a different word. Now I can't do my story anymore. This is such an important exercise because people have to learn how to let go of their expectations in a conversation. They have to listen very carefully, not just to the person right before them. They have to listen to every single person and what they said. If we started a story saying, once upon a time, there was a beautiful princess, but the next person says, and then he decided that that person didn't listen very well, right? So this game is actually a very hard one to do. And maybe if we ever in person, we can do it in person. But for now, I'm going to do a different game with you all. I tried to teach this to my coworkers. Many of them are psychologists, licensed marriage, family therapists, and social workers. And it's hard for them to do too. This is a very specialized couples therapy technique called the Gottman technique. Most couples who are having marital problems will look for a couples therapist. And this is one of the methods. There's many couples therapists out there, many different theories. One of the types of techniques out there, I think 真的有效, and not just for 男女朋友的关系. It's not just for your husband-wife stuff. This is great even for your coworkers and for your children and grandchildren. Just in life, it's a good skill. It's not an easy one to do. Most people who do it hate it the first 10 times, it feels very unnatural, and it feels like 你会很吃亏 in a conversation. But if you can do it properly, you can get what you want out of a conversation. Okay. So here's where I should have bought 2 puppets with me. I'm gonna get some puppets. This is a Gottman technique that requires my visual aids. Okay, so while I'm doing this, I want everyone to stretch because we've been talking for an hour now, or I've been trying to do all this stuff and thinking. We've been on since 1:45, so everyone stretch, stretch, stretch. Okay. I'm on one end and I want to win. Okay, so I want to win. I'm going to pull. But maybe the other person who's arguing with me, they want to win too. So they're pulling back, right? So now we have a tug of war. I pull, they pull harder. They pull harder, I pull harder. In this kind of a game, someone's going to lose. Someone's going to end up getting hurt. Dr. Kopp said, in an interpersonal power struggle, you have a choice to fight or to let go of the rope. Like letting go of the rope means the other person can't, what are they pulling against? They're not going to win anything, right? Because I've let go. So he says the way to do that is to not be invested in a certain outcome. He says, when you give in, it may feel like you're losing at first. That's why I'm telling you all this technique is going to feel like it's not what you were raised with. It doesn't even feel natural in a conversation. But if you can master this technique, you can actually get people to do more of what you want. Okay, so he says letting go looks like a bunch of things. He used his grandbaby as an example. So as a professor, one of his favorite jobs was to babysit his grandbaby, his granddaughter twice a week. And he said during those times, they would have so much fun. They'd play, they'd eat dinner together. But the worst time was getting her ready for bed. They would argue a lot. It was not fun. He couldn't wait to give her back. During those times, they'd argue over like the stupidest thing. He'd say, okay, it's time for your shower. Then she'd start crying. She wouldn't want to put away her toys. Then when it's time to get in the shower, she's in the shower. He'd say, okay, it's time to get out of the shower. Then she'd start crying. Like she didn't want to get out of the tub. It's like, it was actually very stressful for him. He didn't know what to do because he loves her very much, but she has to go to sleep. That's his one job, is to get her into bed before the parents come home, right? So he realized that they would always have this tug of war, time to get ready, time not to get ready. So instead of arguing with her, he would make it seem like it was her idea. He'd say to her, he wouldn't ask her, or he wouldn't say to her, it's time to get cleaned up now, because that would produce a fight. Instead, he would say, tonight, you get to choose. Do you want to take a shower or a bath? Suddenly, she was like, oh, I get to choose? I'm a big girl. Tonight, I want a bath. Okay. And then the same thing would happen, right? She's in the bath. If he said it's time to get out, she would argue with him. So instead of saying it's time to get out, he would say, tonight, you get to choose. Do you want to wear the dinosaur PJs or the princess PJs? And suddenly she felt very powerful. Like it was her idea to get into the tub. It was her idea to get out of the tub. He said the same things work for your boss and your partners. Instead of arguing with them, like, you can't go out, like, you can decide whether you come home through the front door today, or if you want to whatever. You come through the front door at this time, otherwise you stay out after a certain time. You get to choose, you know? So he created ways where people wouldn't get into arguments because it made the other person feel like they're validated, like they are a real person with real feelings just as important as yours, and you recognize them as a person. Okay, so we go back to validation, we go back to the whole learning to let go of the struggle thing. Those are really important to keep in mind for the Gottman method. The Gottman method says, oh, I even went into the other room to help me. I'm gonna use my friends here. Okay, my friends. Can you see this guy? Okay. And then he's got a partner, all right? Kind of slow, right? The couple, happy couple, yay. So she's a stay-at-home mom, and this is a guy that goes home after work every day. So here's a typical conversation that I might see in my private practice. Husband comes home and says, "Hey, wife, why is everything all messed up here? How come there's no dinner on the table? There's trash everywhere. I feel like all you do all day is watch TV, and I'm very frustrated. I'm very tired when I come home from work, and the family is not ready for dinner, and the house is a big mess. This is very stressful for me." Okay, so that is a conversation you might have seen in a home or you might hear on TV. It's a very typical conversation that I hear for couples counseling. Someone is complaining about the other person's lack of performance as part of a couple. Okay. It's very common for this person then to say, "What are you talking about? I do this, I do that, I do this, I do that, blah, 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 blah." Okay. So now this person is very defensive. I don't hear an apology like, "I'm so sorry dinner's not on the table, husband. I'm so sorry that the kids' homework is not done." We don't hear any of that. Instead, we hear, "Oh, being in this family sucks. You're gone all day, and all I do is try and make sure your children don't kill each other. I just, I deal with the schools. They complain to me all the time. You try being the person that the schools complain to." Okay, so now we have two people, 抱怨. That doesn't get a conversation very far. Usually what ends up happening in households is now this person doesn't want to talk, now this person doesn't want to talk. Everyone's afraid of each other. Nothing got resolved. In the Gottman method, there's a different way to approach this. When someone comes in complaining, saying, "You didn't do this right, you didn't do that right," instead of this person saying, "Oh yeah, what about X, Y, and Z?" This person's challenge is to reflect back what they think they heard this person say. Say, person A says something, person B is normally very interested in responding right away. The challenge is for person B to not respond. They have to first let person A feel like they heard what they said. How do you do that? Well, in that improv game, where I would have listened to every single person and the words that they said, even if I didn't agree with the way that story went, I would have needed to follow that story and add to it. So even if I don't agree with what my partner's saying, of like, "Yeah, you're right, I'm very lazy." Instead, I would say, "Okay, in my mind, I'm thinking I don't agree with you, but all I'm doing now is like, okay, husband, you've just come home from work. You're very stressed out. You're disappointed that the home is a mess, and you're angry that there's no food on the table. Is that right?" Okay, that's what you're supposed to do in the Gottman method. What we heard this person say was, I'm repeating back to you what I think I heard you say. And then before I respond with, "Well, it's not true," before I do that, I have to ask, "Did I hear you properly? Did I hear you correctly?" Okay, that is a very important part of the Gottman method. If person B didn't get it right, then person A would continue the 抱怨. So let's pretend person B said, "So you're pissed off because you think you should get a hot meal every time you come home." If person A says, "That's not all I said. I also think you're lazy. I also think you're useless," like whatever, so if I didn't get it right, person A can still come back and say, "You didn't hear me properly." So even if person B disagrees, they have to repeat back what they think they heard. That's the only way person A will feel validated. If you repeat back what you heard, even if you disagree. Now, you're not saying, "I agree with you, I'm lazy," but you could say, "Okay, let me get this straight. You think that the home is a mess and all I do is watch TV, that I don't care about the kids, and I have it very easy compared to you. Did I hear that right?" Only when person A says, "Yeah, you got it right. I think you're lazy and you don't do very much." Okay, only when that person says, you got it right, something magical happens there with this person. When the first person says, oh my God, you heard everything I said, automatically, even if I don't like you, automatically, I think you heard me. Now I have to listen to you. It's a weird psychological trick. It's like when someone smiles at you, even if you don't like them very much, you smile back. So if person A says something you completely disagree with, you reflect back and say, so you think this is wrong with me? You think that's wrong, X, Y, and Z. Did I get that right? When they say yes, automatically, you know, a door has been opened where even if they don't like you or normally don't agree with you, only because you heard them, now subconsciously, they will listen to what you have to say, even if they are closed off about it. Okay, it's a very strange concept. When I have introduced this to my coworkers, many of them have gone home, tried it with like their teenage son. You know, like, why can't you pick up your clothes all the time or whatever? And they come back to me saying, I can't believe it. But the other person listened to me a little bit more than usual. Hilda, well, you have a question? I do see great chats. Thank you, Alice. I sometimes do that in my conversations with people now, where I have a difference. Like I was talking about that project from 2 weeks ago. I made a really big mistake of trying to correct someone's behavior in front of other people are walking by. And apparently that's like the worst way to give feedback in that culture. But for me, it's like the American way is like, it's a safety concern. I have to give you feedback right now. So I learned real quick, like, oh, my American way of trying to give immediate feedback did the opposite result where the person now won't hear it because she was more concerned about losing face than about safety. You know, so in this Gottman method, we're really not interested in ego. Freud talked about ego, and other theorists talked about, I think I'm the most important. Like ego is very 自我, you know? So when we get very caught up in like how we look, Gottman method doesn't work very much anymore because now we're more concerned about sukui. But anyway, if you can do the Gottman method properly, it is something like here. Okay, there is a, sorry, I'm trying to give you an image. I'm going to give you a printout, one example of the Gottman method. Sorry, there's a few. Okay. They're all about trying to build a way of communicating together. Okay. So in the chat, you'll have this resource that you can look to later. But they basically say this will work if you can overcome the relationship lock, the communication lock. Sometimes we get into a pattern of like, uh-oh, this person's going to disagree. This person will become silent. This person's going to walk away. We don't resolve anything. There's usually a relationship pattern. Gottman says, stop that pattern. Let go of your ego and just try listening to the other person. When you listen, though, there's a trick. You have to make them feel like they actually understood. And how do we do that? There's actually a few different tips of relationship. There's a class that I used to teach called clinical interviewing. And in clinical interviewing, there's actually a few basic skills that if you can do it properly, it makes the other person feel like you are the best listener. Usually it starts with something called parroting. Parroting is the most deepen the level. Parroting, think of what a parrot does. A parrot is just a xiao niao that knows how to make human-like sounds. It doesn't actually know how to think of anything. It can say things like 2 + 2 = 4. Does it know 2 + 2 = 4? Or is it just repeating back what it heard? So a xiao niao is only repeating back what it heard, whether it understands it or not. Everybody can do that. In fact, you should try next time you disagree with someone, repeat back the very last sentence that they said. Even if you disagree with it, the very last sentence of what they said. So in that husband-wife where, you don't ever have food ready for me and blah, 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 and this and that, and that's why I think you're the laziest person ever. Even if you don't remember everything else, you think I'm the laziest person ever. But it's best if you can say everything else, like you think because I didn't put food on the table or whatever. If you can do all that, that person will be like, oh, you heard me. They might even think you might even agree with me. Okay, automatically, I'm more interested in what you have to say. Okay, so in the person AB, I'm going to show you how it's done. A says something, B says something. Did I get it right? No, you didn't get it right. Let me start over again. Okay, let me try again. They go back and forth as many times as it takes until this person says, did I get it right? And this person says, yes, you got it right. When this person says, yes, you got it right, now this person can talk back. After everything, I can say, okay, well, let me explain to you why there is no dinner on the table. Your son got it suspended today because they brought something to school they shouldn't have, or whatever it is. And the reason why there's trash everywhere is because your younger son needed help with their homework and got frustrated, and so shredded up all the papers, and I was waiting for you to come home so you could help me discipline. Okay, now there's an explanation, right? Oh, and by the way, I watch TV to save my sanity. Otherwise, I might end up hitting our kid, whatever it is. Like there's probably a reason why this person did what they did. Now, this person could be very tempted to be like, well, you can't starve our children and you can't do this and that. But before they respond, they have to do the same kind of communication tips. Let me try and repeat back to what I think I heard you say. You said that our son creates problems at school and makes it difficult for you to keep a tidy home. Our other son gets frustrated at homework and you need my help disciplining. Is that correct? Okay, that's actually pretty good listening, but most times, most people won't get it right. Most times, most people will start by saying, you did what? They won't bother with a summary. So if this person can say accurately, did I get it right? And this person says yes. Now, every time you talk to the other person, before you respond, you should always be in the practice of repeating back what you think you heard the person say and asking them, did I get that properly correct? It'll be a very strange exercise for you because you may not agree and you may not want to repeat back something horrible. Like, let me get this straight. You like to drink ice cold soda on a hot summer day because it feels good and it makes you feel refreshed. You may completely disagree with that, but if you can repeat it back to someone, they can say yes. Only until they say, yes, you got it right. Then you can say things like, well, according to traditional Chinese medicine, we're supposed to balance things out and we're supposed to detox. And so we're supposed to get things out like oil. And when you have ice, it blocks everything. So my preference for your health, to live a long, healthy life, would be what I was taught, to drink hot water so it can flush out our systems. But it's up to you. Okay, so that's really hard. If you know the way you were raised is 这不可以就不可以, right? But truly, you have to think about what is more important to you in terms of your values. Is it to be right and to be heard and to be followed at the expense of maybe young people in your life not wanting a relationship with you? Or is it more important to have a genuine relationship where things may happen that you disagree with. You got to say what you needed to, but you're letting other people have their perspective, even if you know it's probably going to shorten their lives by 5 years, but they get to make that decision. I can't tell you what's right or wrong with either method, but I can tell you, sadly, when I was growing up, I'd have a lot of Americanized friends asking, why are all my Asian friends liars to their parents? Okay, what does that mean? Well, my Middle Eastern friend could bring his girlfriend home. My white friend could bring their boyfriend home. And then among like the Asian friends, they'd be like, oh, I don't tell my parents I date. It causes too many problems. They don't want to hear it. So we just don't talk about it. If that's the kind of relationship you want, the kind of ways that I've been talking about, like Confucian values, harmony, like that's the perfect way. You will have that kind of relationship. But if you want one where you're like, I don't like who my children date, but at least I know that they're dating. At least they tell me instead of hiding things from me. So there's a bit of a tension between the two. They're very different approaches. Okay, here's where I take a pause and see if anyone has any questions before I move on. So 还没讲话的时候, there's like there's my nonverbal facial expression, like 我那样子的时候, you don't feel like I'm a very open person. When I'm like this, even if inside my head I'm like, I'm not listening to you, you automatically feel like I'm a more open person. So one of my supervisors was a master at this. We would have people coming into the counseling center very upset. 女生的话都会叫他们, oh my gosh, here, have some tissue, drink some water, sit down. 男生的话, sometimes when they're very depressed or anxious, they want to break things. Want to break the fire hose or something and cause a big excitement on campus. So they would call in my supervisor. He was a very gentle old man that knew how to calm people down. And he did something called mirroring. Remember we talked about validation? Babies want to, when they smile, they want you to smile. Adults are the same, even if they're mentally ill. So guys would come in a rage, like wanting to punch. And then my supervisor, Russ, he would pretend to use their body movements. So like, he wouldn't go like this. He would be like acting the way that they act. Once they feel like he's mirroring them, then he would start to relax a certain part of his body, talk. And then after that pretty soon, maybe without even thinking about it, because people want to be mirrored, we'll kind of into this whole, like most of us, when we pass by something, we'll just look at the mirror, even if it's just glass. I used to have an office where it was glass on one side, a mirror on the other. People kept thinking that there was I was always on the other side. I could see them, and all that. But people are the same. When the mirror image is different than what they expect, they move to change it. So my supervisor acted like them, but then he changed one of his arms, because in their minds, they just mirrored each other. People will naturally let down their other arm. And then after he feels like, okay, now they've matched that, then he'll let down this arm. Eventually, the other person will do it without even knowing it. That you can do the same thing too. When you're arguing with someone, take on their pose, whatever their angry pose looks like. And then start to relax yourself. Only change when you feel like they're matching you. And then after they relax that arm, then relax the other. And then after doing that, you can appear like a more open person, more reasonable person. You can appear more loving and more relaxed in the way you sit. When you start to relax your body, if the other person in their mind thought for 1 second we're supposed to be mirrored, they're going to follow you without even knowing it. Okay, I see another hand up. Ann Ling, you have a question? In Taiwanese culture, feeling validated is saving face. It protects my family's face. It's like it keeps the harmony. So that to me is probably what I would protect the most if I was very Taiwanese traditional. But it doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It's just if I'm working with someone else that needs validation in a different way, then I have to, it's almost like knowing their love language. Oh, we went over love language a long time ago, right? Some people love language is 为你. Other people is like 我给你礼物. Other people is like 我帮你装什么东西. So it's just a different way of communicating, just like you would with love, your ideas and feelings. So the validation, I think, is the same for all humans to feel like they matter and that they're not so weird with their needs. And so when someone else reflects back to you, yeah, you're normal, and that's an okay way to approach the world. So just needing to modify that a little bit. Okay, thank you. I'm gonna now go on and talk about, these are tips that I got from the Taiwanese second generation folks, saying, when you don't feel like speaking to the older generation, why? Okay, so this part is a little bit strange because 等于就外嘴，公in a way. Okay. So some of these I'm like, ooh, that's a good one. Others I'm like, well, I don't have that problem, but I'll share it anyway because I think there's probably some commonalities. Okay. So we talked about these communication tips. Okay. Okay. These are the ones. There are a couple others on another page. Okay. Sorry. What am I so fast? I just wanted to be able to see you all and show you like some of the ones I'm going to go over. So the very first one is just to listen. But we've been talking about that this whole time, like different ways of listening. For the listening, there's two levels. One is just parrot back a sentence, or if you forget all the sentences, just the last sentence. If you can't even remember the last sentence, just repeat back a couple of key words, like you're mad. Okay, so parroting is the most easiest. The second one is called paraphrasing. Maybe someone says something very, very long, and you don't use the same exact words, but you use your own words to 大概代表你觉得他刚才讲的重点是什么. So paraphrasing is just going for the main point, and you can use your own words. That gets a little bit tricky because the person might feel like you don't understand what they just said. Easier if you use the words they used. The third is, as was pointed out earlier, our body language and tone, how open we are, how closed we are. So Russ could get people, very agitated people, to relax and calm down. I do this when I see very little patients in child psychology. Sometimes they don't want to use words. So I use play with them. I use their body posture to copy them. And then usually a few sessions later, they start acting nice around me. So sometimes it's not like, oh, within 5 minutes, this person's now thinking I trust them and they trust me. Sometimes it takes some time. That's why I was saying the first 10 times you practice this Gottman method, it's going to feel fake. 你会很想要放弃, like, why am I the only one trying here? And you might actually get it wrong a few times. But if you can practice it to the point where the person feels validated and heard, you're going to get more of what you want. Okay, so the first one that folks thought was important was listen. And now you already know a couple methods to make people feel like you know how to listen. The second part of that is called empathy. Empathy is different than sympathy. Sympathy is like, I feel sorry for you. Okay, like someone in your family passed away, I feel sorry for you. That's sympathy. Empathy is, I know exactly how that feels. So empathy is telling the person, I understand what loss feels like. I may not have lost my grandmother, but I lost my pet during COVID. So I understand loss. So it's one thing just to say, I listen to you, but empathy says, I heard you on a different level. I validate you on a different level. Now I'm not just saying I heard your words, but I think I know how you feel too. If you can do that, where the person feels like, they understand me, they will automatically want to understand you too. Part of this, though, is keeping an open mind. This one is very hard, especially if we know, like, our years of experience here on Earth probably brought you a lot of wisdom. Okay, but when one of my contacts told me about this one, they're like, I went to grad school. I grew up here in the US. How come my mom never wants to listen to me sometimes what I have to say is better than what she has. She just doesn't want to hear it because she's my mom. So they feel very frustrated. They end up not talking to her as much. They end up only calling her when they have to. They feel obligated because they don't want to keep arguing with her. They feel like anytime I have something to say, you don't want to hear it. It just makes you mad. You feel like I'm disrespecting you. Why don't we just not talk very much? I think that's the opposite result of what their zanbei is looking for, right? So I was trying to ask them, well, how can you encourage them to have an open mind towards what you're saying? Part of it was like the second generation person was saying they've never been curious about whether or not there's any other truths out there. They only care about being heard. They never want to hear everyone else. So I don't know how to change that, but I would encourage you, even if you're not interested in what the other person has to think, if you make them feel like you have an open mind, they will likely have an open mind too. Part of that, though, means allowing them to express themselves. Well, this is really hard if, like, you're my mom. She always said, if you cry, I'm going to hit you more. So expressing myself didn't feel very safe while I was growing up. I always got hit anytime I needed to do that. So allowing others to express themselves means you have to make it safe for them. If before you ask someone, well, what are your thoughts, but you interrupt after one sentence, that's not giving people a safe space. So it could mean asking someone to provide input and then really trying to be quiet and listen, only till you can reflect back what you heard, even if you disagree, then can there be some movement back and forth. I have another phrase that I thought was cute. A friend said, tell people that they need to communicate like a salesperson. A salesperson, like before internet, now you can buy everything on Amazon or Alibaba. But before, in the old days, there would be people going from door to door trying to sell vacuum cleaners, encyclopedias in the US. And their job was to tell you why you needed to buy this. They had to give you 101 reasons to say yes. The person who said this one was like, sometimes my mom just says things and says, because I said so. And that's not good enough anymore. I went to school too, and I know something about the world. So if my mom wants to tell me, you got to do it this way, they have to back it up with why. And they said, if I had an idea, I would present it to my teacher. The research shows X, Y, and Z. Now here, we're not very used to asking elders, prove it to me, tell me why. In fact, it's kind of rude to do that. But the second generation person was saying, if you were trying to convince a friend to do something, you would give them a lot of reasons to listen to you. In fact, one of my friends, I think I told you all this before, one of my friends, her mom, 她很听世界日报，世界日报写什么，她什么都听. She believes it 110%. And she loves to be like the marketing person to her friends, going, hey, 我今天看到什么东西. And so one time her mom was telling her friends, did you know that if you drink your own urine, you can actually become younger? I don't know if any of you read that article, right? So some of you are laughing, maybe you heard about this. And my friend was like, oh my God, Mom, please tell me you did not drink your own urine. And her mom was like, 不会很难喝. So she was like, oh my God. But her mom, when she believes these things, tells all of her friends like 101 reasons why you should drink your own urine. So my friend is basically saying, if you're going to be doing that with your friends, you got to be prepared to do that with your children and grandchildren too. You can't just say because I said so. If you're going to spend all that time trying to convince other people why they should drink their own urine, you can't just say to your children, from now on, we all drink our own urine. There has to be like oh, someone left the meeting because I was talking about that. Okay. And another partly related to this is be prepared to answer questions. Don't consider it like offensive when someone asks you why. Actually, I got in trouble a lot because every time my parents would say something, 我很好奇. Like if there's a button, I always wanted to press it and see what happens. Half the time, nothing bad would happen, but sometimes something bad would happen. you know. So a lot of times, just because of my 个性, I'm a very curious child, and I'm still a very curious adult. When someone says something, when I ask why, I'm not saying I'm not going to do it unless you tell me why. I'm like, ooh, tell me more. Maybe I want to tell my friends to do this. But for some reason, when I ask why in my family, it's very disrespectful. Why would you ever do such a thing? It's like, because I might want to tell my friends to do it. You know, so in that sense, the second generation person was like, asking questions is not supposed to be confrontational. It's not even supposed to be offensive. You should treat it like it's a compliment, like I'm listening to you and I'm open to hearing more. I might want to be your partner in this. And then with the final final minute, there were two others. 他们讲得太直接, so I had to find a better way to write this. The way that my friend had said it was a little too rude. 太直接了. He said something like, I want to tell my mom that her word is not the final word of God. I was like, whoa, that's so 直接. But what he was really trying to say is it's not the final truth. Maybe there's other truths in this world. Maybe my viewpoint is just as valid. Maybe your viewpoint is not right, or maybe it's right for that context. Please just be open to some dialogue. And then someone else who has a very strong mother, a mother with a very strong personality. I love her a lot. She's great at numerology. She's great at 看脸. So I like talking to her, but that's because she's not my mom. I think she's fun. But her child says, please tell people not to be a bossy boots. If you want to have something done, you can ask nicely as you would with other people. This is a very strange concept for some Taiwanese. Like, 你做应该做的，我为什么要鼓励你？为什么要要求？为什么要拜托？ So this is another cultural thing about expectations, about harmony, our role in a family versus individualistic, like I'm doing you a favor when I do this. Okay.
你有講學一箍的，我明仔載當着機長嘛，
Oh,
Okay.
what is this?
我載我知唔知啦？
I think
That-
we have someone
We
trying
need
to
to-
be heard right now.
有戲票，
Okay. Someone's on, and I'm not sure who, but I'll let the host take care of that. Okay, so I've done a lot of different talking, and I know we were technically scheduled until 3:15, but some people might want to stay until 3:30 with questions. So that concludes the formal presentation portion, and now I'm available if people just have questions. And as people